114.
It's a moment in court that shocked everyone. The sister of a slain 13-year-old cheerleader dropping heart-shaped stones into a glass. One after another, the glass fills up until she reaches the number 114.
This jar now holds 114 stones, one for each of the 114 stab wounds that my sister had to endure.
Tristyn Bailey, last seen wearing her cheerleader uniform, went missing on Mother's Day 2 years ago in Jacksonville, Florida. This surveillance video shows her at 1:15 a.m. She's walking with a 14-year-old classmate, Aidan Fucci. When police picked up Fucci for questioning, he posted this truly disturbing photo of himself in the back of a police car, giving the V sign with the caption, "Hey guys, has anybody seen Tristyn lately?" He also posted a Snapchat video. During his police interrogation, Fucci's parents scolded him for posting on social media.
The Snapchat that you did was not very smart.
Not a Snapchat that you did. It's all over. You're all over the internet everywhere.
Tristyn's body was discovered in a secluded wooded area. She had been stabbed 114 times. Fucci pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. At his sentencing hearing, each of Tristyn's siblings and her parents all dropped stones into the jar.
So impactful, it just absolutely stopped everybody. Complete quiet in court.
Fucci presented this handwritten apology. "I'm sorry for all the pain I caused the Bailey family. I know my apology will not fix anything or bring her back." That didn't sway the judge, who sentenced Fucci to the maximum penalty allowable under Florida law.
There is only one appropriate sentence in this case. I sentence you to life in prison.
After the sentencing, Tristyn's family gathered outside court. They were all wearing shirts emblazoned with, "That's my squad, Tristyn Bailey strong," in teal, her favorite color.
We are very appreciative of this outcome and feel that it is the right verdict considering how heinous the crime is and Aiden's behaviors around it.
The darkness of a Florida night in 2021 was shattered by a violence that defied every convention of youth, every expectation of community, and every boundary of human decency. We are here in January 2026 to look past the frantic searches in the woods and the viral footage of a teenager who seemed to find amusement in the face of absolute horror. The case of Aidan Fucci is not just a story of a crime. It is an investigation into the cold reflection, a study of a psyche that remained unmoved while a community wept. 5 years later, the infamy has settled into a living death within the high-security walls of the Florida Department of Corrections. We are performing a psychological excavation of a young man who traded the infinite potential of his youth for a 7x12 concrete box, where the only thing left to count is the heartbeat of a life that has been effectively deleted from the social fabric. I want to welcome you to the channel. We look for the truth in the shadows of cold, cases, and closed files. If you value this kind of deep dive investigation, please consider subscribing. And as we begin this journey together, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Whether you're joining us from the United States, Canada, Australia, or anywhere else in the world, leave a comment below. It helps us remember that these stories, though local, touch hearts across the globe. To understand the 2026 reality of Aidan Fucci, we must first confront the public image versus private reality that defined his early life. Fucci was a teenager in a world of digital mirrors, a boy who grew up in the quiet suburbs of St. Johns County. To his peers, he was just another face in the hallway. To the world, he would become the cold eyes of a predator. But perfection, or even normalcy, functions as camouflage. Beneath the surface of his routine was an emotional withdrawal so profound it bordered on the clinical. Financial records and behavioral history from his school years don't show a monster in waiting, but a mental disengagement, a shortening of conversations, and a delayed response to the humanity of others. The crime was not an explosion, but an exit into a fantasy world where he believed he was the architect of his own dark legend. The character contrast in this case remains one of the most devastating in modern true crime history. On one side, we have Tristyn Bailey, a girl who was the embodiment of light, agency, and connection. She was a cheerleader, a friend, a daughter whose humanity was so vibrant it continues to illuminate her community in 2026. On the other side, we have Fucci, passive, avoidant, and emotionally sealed. While Tristyn worked to stabilize and connect, Fucci was mentally disengaged, building an alternate emotional world where his entitlement outweighed the life of another. This imbalance between the openness of Tristyn's life and the silence of Fucci's withdrawal is the core of the tragedy. In 2026, the psychological deterioration of Aidan Fucci is a study in clinical isolation. Reports from the Florida State Prison suggest a young man who has moved from the performance of his arrest into a catatonic state of routine. The chaos he sought in that wooded area has been replaced by the monotony he earned. Use your senses to understand his current living death, the industrial hum of the ventilation, the sterile white light that never truly fades, and the chills that come from knowing that every morning at 5 a.m., the state reminds him that he is no longer the director of his own story. He is a man who practiced being unmoved until it became his permanent reality. The fantasy and escape that fueled his crimes has been crushed by the weight of the concrete loop. Fucci once believed his actions would grant him a kind of immortality. Instead, they have granted him a permanent limbo. In 2026, he is reaching the age where his peers are graduating from college and starting lives. For Fucci, those milestones have been systematically erased. He will never have a child, a career, or a legacy that isn't stained by the blood of an innocent. This is the ultimate milestone erasure, trading the prime of human life for a space no larger than a parking spot. The investigation and unraveling of his status in 2026 shows a man caught in a dehumanizing routine. His behavioral reports indicate a withdrawal from the prison population, partly for his own safety, and partly because he has nothing left to say to a world that has already judged him. The inside-the-walls reality is one where he is at the bottom of the prison hierarchy, protected by the very state he defied, and alone with the digital ghost of his own infamy. The confession that felt so fragmented and insufficient in 2021 has become his only narrative in 2026. As we move toward the next phase of this excavation, we will look at the anatomy of the 114 stabs, not for the sake of the graphic, but to understand the mental disengagement required for such an act. We will explore the 2026 legal finality of his life sentence, and the final reflective truth of what happens when a community refuses to let the light be extinguished by the dark. The clinical breakdown of an act so profound in its cruelty requires us to step away from the noise and look into the silence of the motive. In 2026, the forensic investigation into the 114 wounds inflicted upon Tristyn Bailey has shifted from a search for evidence to a study of mental disengagement. This was not a crime born of a momentary loss of control, but a pursuit of it. As we examine the records from the Florida Department of Corrections, we see a young man who, 5 years into his life sentence, is forced to reconcile with the permanent limbo of his own making. The state has replaced the chaotic fantasy of that Florida night with a dehumanizing routine that offers no exits and no audience for the performance he once craved. The Tristyn Bailey legacy in 2026 stands as a powerful rebuttal to the darkness that tried to claim her. While the perpetrator exists in a state of social erasure, Tristyn's name has become a beacon of advocacy and community strength. The Tristyn Bailey Strong movement has evolved from a local rallying cry into a sophisticated foundation dedicated to youth safety and victim advocacy. Her milestones, the ones that were stolen, are being reclaimed by a community that refuses to let her light be dimmed. While Aidan Fucci marks his age against the gray of a prison wall, Tristyn is remembered through the thousands of lives her legacy continues to protect and inspire. In the psychological void of Year 5, we observe a perpetrator who has become a digital ghost. The viral infamy that Fucci seemed to embrace during his initial arrest has been replaced by the crushing anonymity of the Florida state prison system. Reports from early 2026 indicate a man who is retreating into a catatonic state of existence, where the chills of his isolation are the only sensation left. He is a man who lived for the likes of his dark performance, now trapped in a space where no one is watching. This is the part most people don't see, the long-term psychological fallout of a man who knows he can never truly belong anywhere ever again. The milestone erasure for a young offender like Fucci is particularly poignant as he approaches his mid-20s. In the outside world, this is a decade defined by discovery and the building of a future. For Fucci, these years are being systematically replaced by the concrete loop. He will never experience the freedom of a career, the intimacy of a lifelong partner, or the pride of a parent. Every morning at 5 a.m., the sterile lights of his high-security housing serve as a reminder that he traded an entire lifetime for a singular act of violence. This is the ultimate no-sympathy reality. He is the architect of a void that he now has to inhabit for the rest of his natural life. The investigation into his current behavioral status reveals a prison hierarchy that offers him no refuge. As a former high-profile youth offender, his safety requires a level of extreme protective custody that functions as a prison within a prison. He is kept alive by the very system he defied, yet he is kept alone. This paradox, being protected while being erased, is the defining feature of his 2026 existence. The inside-the-walls reality is one of total sensory deprivation, where the only thing he has to look at are the ghosts of his own choices. As we look toward the third phase of this excavation, we will confront the thematic conclusions of the Aidan Fucci case. We will explore the finality of the 2026 legal landscape and the philosophical reckoning of what justice looks like when the crime is so absolute. We will ask if the living death of a life sentence is the ultimate form of accountability for a man who believed he was above the law of humanity. The psychology of the courtroom in the Fucci case was never about a defense of innocence. It was a desperate, failed attempt to find a why for a what that had no human logic. In 2026, the systemic consequences of those legal proceedings have reached their final, immutable state. The Florida court system, which processed the evidence of 114 wounds with a clinical, heavy-hearted precision, has moved past the era of hearings. The appeals that once represented a theoretical exit for a young man who believed he was untouchable have been systematically dismantled. Today, the 2026 legal status of Aidan Fucci is one of absolute finality. There are no more shock turns, no more viral outbursts in the hallway, and no more chances for a different ending. The state has spoken, and the answer is a lifetime of silence. The permanent limbo of his existence is now defined by the inside-the-walls reality of the Florida Department of Corrections. 2. Maintain the safety of an inmate with such high notoriety, the state must employ a level of supervision that borders on total sensory deprivation. In early 2026, Fucci exists in a state where his every breath is a matter of administrative record. He is safe only because he is removed from the very population he once thought he could command with his darkness. This is the psychology of exposure, when a perpetrator's crimes are so absolute that even the walls of a prison offer no social refuge, only a deeper, more profound isolation. As we look at the systemic consequences, we see the ripple effect this case had on Florida's juvenile justice laws. In 2026, the name Aidan Fucci is cited in legislative halls as the reason why the living death of a life sentence remains a necessary tool for the most egregious crimes. His actions didn't just end one life, they forced a rewrite of the social contract for an entire generation of Florida youth. While the perpetrator sits in his cell, the system has hardened around him, ensuring that the concrete loop he inhabits is reinforced by the collective will of a society that refuses to forgive. The psychological deterioration in Year 5 is marked by a transition from defiance to a quiet hollowing out of the self. Behavioral reports suggest that the fantasy world Fucci inhabited, the one where he was a figure of power and mystery, has completely collapsed under the weight of the dehumanizing routine. Without an audience to perform for, he is forced to confront the absolute void of his own identity. He is a man who traded his future for a moment of infamy, only to find that infamy in a prison cell is just another name for being forgotten. This is the clinical monotony of his 2026 reality, waking up to the same sterile walls, eating the same standardized meals, and realizing that the next 50 years will look exactly like today. The milestone erasure continues to extract its toll. In 2026, Fucci's peers are building careers, finding love, and contributing to the world. For him, the only milestones are the anniversaries of his own condemnation. He will never have the agency to choose his path or the freedom to escape the shadow of his own name. In the eyes of the law, he has been successfully archived. He is no longer a student, a son, or a citizen. He is a permanent ward of the state, a digital ghost whose only remaining function is to serve as a reminder of the price of absolute cruelty. As we move into the final phase of this excavation, we will address the thematic conclusions of the Aidan Fucci story. We will examine the final no sympathy disclaimer and the philosophical reckoning of what it means for a community to find healing in the face of such darkness. We will close the file on a case that changed Florida forever, leaving you with the final reflective truth of a life lived in the cold reflection of a concrete cell. The thematic conclusion of the Aidan Fucci narrative is a testament to the fact that while darkness can be sudden and devastating, light is persistent and transformative. As we reach the end of this 2026 excavation, we find ourselves standing at the intersection of accountability and memory. The living death of the perpetrator has reached its equilibrium. He is a man whose existence is now defined by the walls he cannot leave and the silence he cannot break. In the high-security corridors of the Florida State Prison, the cold reflection is no longer a performance. It is his permanent reality. He is a ghost in a jumpsuit, a cautionary tale for a digital age, and a man who successfully traded his humanity for a life of clinical monotony. We must address the no sympathy disclaimer with total, unyielding clarity. In the investigation of the murder of Tristyn Bailey, there is no nuance to be found in the perpetrator's intent. The 114 wounds were not an accident, a lapse in judgment, or a cry for help. They were the calculated pursuit of a dark fantasy by a young man who believed he was the only protagonist in the world. In 2026, as we look at the strength of the Bailey family and the resilience of the St. Johns County community, we see that justice is not just a sentence. It is the refusal to allow the perpetrator to define the legacy of the victim. Aidan Fucci has been effectively erased from the social contract, and he has earned every second of the permanent limbo that now defines his life. The philosophical reckoning of this case forces us to ask, what does life mean for a person who took everything from another? In 2026, the answer is found in the concrete loop. It is the morning alarm at 5 a.m., the cold steel of the cell, and the realization that the world has built a beautiful, thriving legacy for Tristyn Bailey while he remains frozen in time. The living death is the ultimate form of accountability because it forces the perpetrator to be the sole witness to his own obsolescence. He is the only one who has to live with Aidan Fucci every day, and in a high-security cell, that is a sentence worse than any finality. The final legacy of Tristyn Bailey is the true ending of this story. While the perpetrator is a digital ghost, Tristyn is a living force. In 2026, the Tristyn Bailey Strong Foundation has reached new heights, funding self-defense programs, mental health resources for youth, and victim advocacy initiatives that have saved countless lives. Her name is not a trigger for trauma, but a call to action. Her milestones, the birthdays, the graduations, the life she should have had, are being honored by a community that has turned its grief into a shield for others. This is the triumph of the human spirit over the cold eyes of a predator. The final question I leave for you is this. In an era where we can be famous for all the wrong reasons, has the social erasure of Aidan Fucci been enough to deter others who seek infamy? Does the living death of a life sentence offer the healing a community needs, or is the true justice found in the work we do to keep Tristyn's light shining? Tell me in the comments. I want to know if you believe the state of Florida has finally closed the door on this darkness, or if there is still a lesson we have yet to learn from the concrete box. We are a community of investigators, and your perspective is the final word. Let that sink in as the lights dim on another night in the Florida State Prison. The case of Aidan Fucci is a reminder that while one person can cause unfathomable pain, an entire community can choose to rise above it. In our next video, I'm opening the vault on a case where the betrayal came from within a family, a perfect home that hid a dark secret for decades until 2026 finally revealed the truth. If you aren't subscribed, you're going to miss the update that proves even the thickest walls have ears. Don't get left outside. Join us. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.